Hello and welcome back. This is going to be another Divine Partnership Coaching video. And in this one, I wanted to address one of you wonderful commenters mentioned that they're worried for their DM, that there might be karmics on the other end who are preventing them from coming into union. And that's actually a very common thing. And it's a challenging thing, especially if well, not if, especially when you really love someone, whether they're your twin flame or not. When you really love somebody and you see that they're being hurt or deceived or lied to or blocked, you want to help. You want to reach out. You want to do something. And I want to try to speak to this. I feel like in my mind and my heart, I understand how it works, but putting words to it might be a little bit different. Also, just so you know, while I am smoking, I'm sitting outside. It's really, really cold. So most of this is not actually smoke. It's just my magic coming out, right? In any case, one of the things that I've noticed, because my DM in particular, so he had karmics when I met him, and when we were together, they were still kind of in the background. I actually find it quite interesting because when we were together, they seemed much less interested in being involved. They were kind of there in the background, and because I'm not a dramatic or super territorial person, and several of them had familial ties to my DM, and that I didn't want to be the kind of partner who was like, I don't want you hanging out with them, especially because that's what he told me that they were like, and I'm going, well, I certainly don't want to be like that, especially, or like, for one, I don't want to be that kind of person, and two, you clearly didn't like that. And I mean, even telling me of his exes, there was a lot of that sort of like toxic femininity in there. And actually, it's more toxic masculinity. Usually, when we're like, say, if we identify as feminine, as a woman, when we're toxic, we're usually actually in toxic masculinity. And if we identify as masculine or a man and we're in toxicity, we're actually usually in toxic feminine energy. It's kind of an interesting thing to note. But, being territorial and being a bully or being the kind of woman who's like, you can't see them or you can't talk to them or I don't like them or like invading privacy or just being like the drive, being action oriented, is very Mars oriented, very reverse emperor. That's toxic masculine energy. And we often get there more so because we are afraid of losing something. We don't have good self-worth, and so we feel like we have to control it. And like with my masculine in particular, he said that like even some of the karmics that he'd been with before we were in union officially for 14 years, they would even get upset at him being friends with his family, especially any feminine family, when he felt like he wasn't allowed to see or talk to anyone without any permission or anything like that. And the person that he's with now is very, very similar. So in some ways worse, in some ways not as bad. Now I bring this up. Actually, it's not from a place of judgment. I was in a judgy place early on. I will completely own that. I was in a very judgy place, especially because for me it was a projection of like I have those feelings. I've had those feelings. Like I don't want you hanging out with so and so because they make me question whether or not you really love me and they're taking time from you and I want that time and things like that. And so to see it reflected in other people, I would get mad at them and ignore my own reflection of it. I'm not in a judgy place about it anymore, but it's actually because I recognize that his interactions with those people are largely to do with needing to heal mother wounds, and they're willing to have the sorts of immature fights and dynamics with him that I wasn't. A lot of times that he would accuse me of, but that we didn't actually have. He was constantly afraid that I would turn into his exes and treat him the same way, especially if we ever had like a full, like, painted across the town kind of commitment. And I had a fear, which is part of what manifested because he was afraid and I was afraid, and fear is a very powerful manifesting, not necessarily a tool because we don't usually use fear to manifest on purpose, but it does manifest. Fear and joy are the two most powerful manifesting energies out there. And most of us, before we know better, manifest by fear. And oftentimes, when we're in a fear space, we attract people who are also in a fear space. And you'll notice that, one, by looking around and seeing who's around you. Who are you manifesting around you that you are afraid to be honest with? And it could even be somebody who's nice to you, but you feel like you can't tell them, you know what, I'm just not hungry, or I just really don't want to hang out, or I don't want to talk with you, or anything like that. If you're afraid to tell them that, there's some part of you that is either you're afraid of being too much or being rejected, or you have an intuitive sense that they are going to feel very rejected by it and go to a victim place or be passive aggressive or be outright aggressive. And look for that reflection, because if you're seeing that your twin flame, and this is often divine masculines but not always, if you're seeing that they're with people that are aggressive or very narcissistic, or they're bullies, or they're possessive and jealous, or you think that they are deceiving them or doing spell work, which spell work can sometimes actually, we will see it come out in cards, or we might intuitively get the sense that somebody's doing spell work, and it can actually be gaslighting, because spells are spoken magics. And so gaslighting is a type of dark magic. And they, that's a story for another time. But you could be afraid that they're twisting your DM up. You could be afraid that they're telling them things or pretending to be someone that they're not. I know that the karmic that my DM's with right now, in fact, as far as I can tell, has been attempting to imitate me. Like, I don't know, I wasn't there for the exact interactions. I can only go off of what he has told me, what I've seen her do, what I've heard from others, what I've seen online, and then what spirit has shown me. So there's a combination of that. But she's tried very hard to imitate me, but it's not her thing. I actually feel kind of bad because I've done that before, trying to imitate who I thought my DM really wanted me to be, and actually it hurt me more than it helped me. And my DM is very, very intuitive. He's not learned how to master it, but he can tell when you're not being honest. And the worst part is if you're simply not being honest in the sense that you're trying to be someone you're not, even though you honestly just want to please them, he feels like you're lying to him, and that hurts a relationship. A lot of people are like that. But in trying to be me rather than being herself, she broke a lot of promises, and a lot more than was necessary. And I'd imagine that that happens a fair amount too, in other dynamics that she has going on. And I feel for her. It's also kind of a Gemini thing. She's a Gemini sun. I have Gemini rising. I grew up. My mother's also a Gemini. I know a lot of people with strong Gemini placements, and we're constantly in this duality of, like, who we are at a core is a changeable person. So we are often in like a consistent mode of change. Even my DM in Vedic is right on the cusp, like right on the cusp of Gemini and Cancer. So there's that too, and he's also very changeable. So there's a lot of that stuff that happens. But like in trying to change so much, and not just being yourself, even if that's a changeable person, you end up giving people the idea that you're one way when you're not. And that itself can become a cycle in our minds that causes us to go into like victim narcissism cycles, or even outright, even overt narcissist cycles. And that can be quite scary, because the storm brewing inside of us then starts to come to the outside of us. And you might even notice, this isn't, and I'm just using my own story as an example. There are a whole lot of things going on, but there's a couple of things that you need to recognize if you have a twin flame who you believe is in some sort of situationship with either a false flame or a karmic soulmate, or anything that it's not going well. Is one, you cannot save them. You cannot rescue them. You can pray for them that they get clarity and things like that, but you cannot save them. And if they are truly your twin flame, you also are reflecting that. You either have someone in your life, or you are doing something in your life that is a reflection of allowing yourself to be hurt by others. And more often than not, it is the savior syndrome itself. If you feel like they're not capable of rescuing themselves, and that you need to step in and do something, or even just spend all your time thinking about it, that's your reflection. You want to help them get out of their toxic situationship with a karmic who is hurting them, then work on healing yourself in all the ways that you are being codependent with anyone else, and also where you're toxically independent. And don't worry, and also you also want to get to a place. It's a little hard when you know that somebody, especially if you find out that they are intentionally hurting your partner, or your twin flame, or that, at least in the beginning they had nefarious plans, or that they're only with them for money or because of fear or things like that. You're going to have to work on those shadows. You need to look at where you have done the same thing, or where you have feared that they have done that to you, etc., etc. This might end up being a two-part thing, but I think I'm almost done. But look for the reflections in it. Spirit has put you both in this position for several important reasons. If you feel like you constantly have to save them, then actually you've probably been emasculating them for a long time and aren't realizing it. Look it up. Look at the ways that women often emasculate men. It's not what you think. It's not always just shouting them down and saying, don't be a wuss, but that can be included. Do you do that? Think about those things, and think about, also recognize that the karmic is not just there for them. It's also there for you to decide, what kind of feminine do I want to be? What kind of masculine do I want to be? And look at how you can heal that sort of stuff, and then get to a place where you genuinely appreciate them. Where you genuinely appreciate them, and where you can talk about the tale of it without being judgmental, but also without trying to hide parts of it. Like, if you're embarrassed for them, or you're worried about them hurting you or hurting your partner, then you're adding to that fear energy, and you're manifesting more of that. And it's also a matter of sitting back and looking at, okay, so if they're doing things that I don't like, and I know that anybody who comes into my vibration is a reflection of me, and anyone who comes into my twin's vibration is a reflection of them, then you know that even if you hardly see their karmic or anything, they are still reflecting you in some ways. So you got healing work to do, and when you do it, you also help the karmic